You're listening to a production of SportsLink Digital Radio.
Welcome into this week's episode of Behind the Lines. I am Ryan Stojets. Caden Vincent, my usual co-host, is out today, so we've got two wonderful guests. We got Evan Stowell and Dane Massey. Guys, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us. Real pleasure. Excited to talk some college football.
Yeah, I was here a couple weeks ago behind the show, Behind the Lines, and I had some pretty hot takes. I'm pretty excited about my takes here today, and we'll get to that later.
Can't wait to hear them. So we'll start by talking about the Ball State Cardinals. They dropped a tough loss yesterday in a midweek action. They fell to Bowling Green 24-21. A hard-fought game where they battled back, were in it to the very end. Initial takeaways, guys.
And it's frustrating because that kick that on the last couple seconds, that kick was it looked like it was going in. And when you end a game like that where it comes up just short, I mean, he was like 3 yards short.
Yeah, it landed like in the back of the end zone,
yeah.
So it wasn't far. And it was a 52-yard kick.
Yeah, I get it was a far kick, but to have your season basically end like that, I know they're not out of bowl contention just yet. They could get 5 wins and have that FCS win over Indiana State probably count towards it, but for now, it's looking a little dim. But that when you end a season like that, it's really hard for a team to come back like that. I mean, they had 3 turnovers on offense, and the passing attack that entire game was just non-existent. Kyle Kelly only had 66 passing yards. Only had 9 completions. 9 for 16, 66 passing yards, no passing touchdowns. Again, the receivers got to catch the ball, but which they had problems with that. Kyle Kelly had some great looks throwing the ball. These receivers just got to catch the ball. It's as simple as that. However, the rushing attack, again, proved to be absolutely phenomenal. I mean, Kyle Kelly was running all over this play. He was juking out defenders left and right, had 2 rushing touchdowns and almost 100 yards rushing on 19 rushing attempts. Marquez Cooper also contributed in that rushing attack out of 125 attempts, 90 yards and a touchdown. And the defense also stepped up. 10 and a half tackles for a loss, 3 sacks. You couldn't have asked for a better day from that Ball State defense. Keontae Newsom also had a career game as a game wrecker in this one. 10 total tackles and 3 tackles for a loss with a half sack. I mean, this team had everything going right for them, but again, 3 turnovers. You can't turn the ball over. It's just simple as that. And when that mixed with, the passing offense not getting going, it's just not going to end well for them. Because and then also, Bowling Green had some very big plays. I mean, you saw it where you saw the stiff arm by the running back going down the sideline. I mean, it was just the big plays that this Ball State defense gave up. So you take those 3 away, and Ball State could have easily walked away with the win.
A lot of good stuff there, Evan.
Yeah, I'm with Dane here. I really do think they should have won that game last night. And I actually think Kyle Kelly threw the ball well enough for them to win. The drop touchdown in the end zone, Kyle threw an absolute bomb downfield. Perfect, hit him right on the money, hit him in the head. I mean, you can't do much better than that. I do not blame Kyle Kelly for the loss. I think he played fairly well. He's not the dominant throwing quarterback.
That's
on
exactly
the
what
Ball
I was
State
saying.
team.
Yeah.
So it's not that big of a deal that he only threw 19 times. Several drops, several plays that should have been made by the Ball State Cardinals. If they could just catch the ball a little bit better, I think they come away out of that game with a win.
And I think that Kyle Kelly just as a whole has never really been known to be that kind of big arm, accurate. Let's throw it 50 yards down the field and he's going to throw an absolute dart down the field. He's never been that kind of guy. He's always been kind of a guy that's been known to kind of have that ability to use his legs in troubled situations. I mean, we saw that last night. I mean, the 2 touchdowns and almost 100 yards on rushing speak for themselves. So when you have a guy like Kyle Kelly, sure, the arm strength and the accuracy, that can get better in the offseason. But for right now, Kyle Kelly's doing the best that he can do. I mean, there were some balls that were, especially with the throw behind the backfield to Marquez Cooper, which he could have caught and turned into a turnover fumble, going back the other way to Bowling Green. Sure, they've had a lot of mistakes, but when you're a starting quarterback for about 3 weeks now, you're kind of known to have these mistakes. But in terms of Kyle Kelly, the development's going to be there. But so far, you couldn't have asked for a better game from Kyle Kelly in this offense.
I do think you're seeing the week-to-week development from Kyle Kelly that you want to see. I think you're seeing him get more confident commanding the huddle, get him more confident throwing the football. And yeah, not only is he a run-first quarterback, but we're in November now. It is cold, it's windy. It's getting harder to throw the football as is. So I do think that's something you also got to factor in when you criticize Kelly. But overall, the Cardinals battled, and something that I want to touch on before we turn the page to next week is the way that game ended. ended. It was 21-21 in the last few minutes. Bowling Green driving, looking like they're going to punch it in for a touchdown, but the Ball State defense, a few huge plays at the goal line to hold Bowling Green to a field goal. They get the ball back, can't do anything with it, turn it over on downs, so you think the game's over, but then the Cardinals use their 3 timeouts, get the stop, get Bowling Green out of what they felt was comfortable field goal range, get another shot on offense, get into, I don't know if you'd call that field goal range in college, but at least give yourself a chance at the end with the 52-yarder. Came up a little short, but still the Cardinals defense did some good things, even though they lost the turnover battle. It was impressive that Ball State was able to battle into the very end.
I mean, certainly. I mean, like I said before, like this Ball State defense did everything it could. I mean, like I just said before, 10.5 total tackles like behind the line, 3 sacks. I mean, you couldn't have asked. I mean, that goal line stand also. You couldn't have asked for a better game from this Ball State defense, but this Ball State team just needs to find a way to put it all together. I mean, like I said before, the passing offense was not there. Turnovers. This Ball State team needs to have a complete game. I have yet to see it, and once they do, I think they'll be going in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm with Dane. Their defense did a really good job at the end of the game, kept them in it. Ball State had a chance to win and tie at the end. So you can't fault the defense, and you can't not like anything they did yesterday. Obviously, you lost the turnover battle, but that's really on your offense for committing 3 turnovers. I mean, you're going to lose that battle 9 times out of 10 if you're committing 3 turnovers. So I think from the Ball State defensive perspective, you like what you saw. I don't think there's anything really to fault there. They only gave up 24. The goal line stand was really good. Obviously, they kind of let Bowling Green drive down the field, but that's expected. Bowling Green has a bit of a better passing attack, obviously, than the Cardinals. They threw for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns, did Connor Bazelak. So there's really nothing you can fault Ball State for. I think they have, as Dane said, they haven't really put that complete game together, but they looked pretty good mostly.
So another loss, disappointing for the Cardinals. A loss they fought hard in, but they did drop to 2-7 overall, 1-4 in conference, eliminating them from MAC West contention. But turning the page, there are still 3 games left on the schedule this year. On Tuesday, so they got a short week coming up. They got a Wednesday game, then a Tuesday game the following week. Ball State's heading up to DeKalb, Illinois to take on the NIU Huskies, and with the Cardinals out of bowl contention, out of MAC West contention, what's the mindset, what's the motivation heading into a game like this?
It's going to be to play spoiler. I mean, there's a lot of teams right now that are looking to get into bowl contention and stay in contention, not only for a bowl game, but for the entire MAC championship game as a whole. And with Ball State out of it, now the mindset's kind of like, let's go play spoiler. Let's go give teams like Miami and Toledo, teams that are in our division, let's go give them a hard time. Let's go mess up their schedules, and let's just go mess up their record and ruin their chances. So, I mean, Ball State needs to put a complete game together, because I have yet to see Ball State put a complete game where everything is clicking together. I mean, we saw it against Indiana State in this year, but until now, we have yet to see Ball State against a formidable opponent put a complete game together. So going forward, it's going to be interesting. We'll see what the Cardinals will do, especially with, you got Northern Illinois next week, you got Miami coming up, who are 2 key rivals for Ball State, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do against those kind of opponents going forward.
See, I'm going to go a little bit opposite of Dane here. I think your motivation is you want to have good vibes going into next season. You want to look at the end of this season and say, wow, we really got better by the end of the year. And I think you can already say that. Kyle Kelly's clearly made a difference. I mean, they won against Central Michigan, almost won against Toledo, almost won against Bowling Green. They've looked better with Kyle Kelly at the helm. So you already have that positive energy going into next year. But what I look at is the game that I think they need to win and they should win against Kent State. Kent State is probably the other team in the MAC that's had the toughest season. They're 0-5 in the conference. They're 1-8 overall. I think if you don't beat Kent State, that's a problem. I look at it a little bit differently today, and he says, I want to see how they do against Miami of Ohio and Northern Illinois. Yeah, that's fine. But I think if they beat Kent State, who they should be, that's the one game they should be, then I think that's a real measuring stick of where they're at. But if they can do well against Miami and Northern Illinois, that's great. But, yeah, I circle that Kent State game as one to watch, and they should really, control that matchup.
Yeah, I think you both really make excellent points. I think that Kent State game, that'll be here at Schumann Stadium in a couple weeks, that's going to be one where the Cardinals will be favored in, and it's going to be one where they expect to win, because Kent State lost a tough one to Akron last night where they blew a pretty big lead late. Haven't won a conference game, as you mentioned, so the Cardinals going to be in a situation in that game where they're not really, where they haven't really been in much this year, and that's where they're going to be favored. They're going to have an expectation to go out and perform and win the game. And I think that, you have seen that incremental process where maybe it doesn't show up in the win-loss column, but the Cardinals, I do think this is a better team than the team we saw, say, against Georgia Southern in Week 4 that got absolutely demolished. I think that you're seeing progress. You're seeing the offense start to come together. You're seeing Kyle Kelly get more confident each and every week under center ever since he's been the undisputed guy. And Ball State's defense, they've been doing good. We've talked about it, but they're also running the ball better offensively, not just with Kyle Kelly, but with Marquez Cooper, with guys like Vaughn Pemberton who are stepping up, Charlie Spiegel, Rico Barfield, a lot of depth at that running back position, and the Cardinals are getting those guys involved in the offense in a lot of creative ways. But to Dane's point also, I do think there's absolutely motivation to play spoiler. Obviously, you want to win the games you're supposed to win, but I'm looking at the standings right now. I see Miami of Ohio atop the MAC East at 4-1 in conference. There's 3 other teams right below them in the MAC East with a 3-2 conference record. So wouldn't it be something if the Miami Redhawks come to Schumann Stadium thinking they're going to cakewalk their way to Detroit, win the MAC East, and the Cardinals can spoil them? How special would that be, especially after last year when these two teams played? The Cardinals had a trip to the Bahamas Bowl at their fingertips until the Redhawks snatched it away in the fourth quarter. So that's certainly going to be a fun one. And with this NIU one, it's a rivalry. They battle for the Bronze Stalk Trophy every year. And last year, I mean, what a game it was between these two teams. Ball State rallying from a 3-score deficit to win it in overtime, 44-38. And it's a short week. And I guess something that we'll touch on, and this could really go to any level of football, you're coming off of a tough loss on the road. You got a short week, and then you're going on the road again. What kind of toll could that take on this Cardinals team?
And, with rivalry games, you never know. That's all. That's what I always say with these kind of games, battling for a rivalry trophy. You never know. I mean, we saw last year, Northern Illinois, we thought had it, and they blew a 3-score lead to give Ball State the Bronze Stalk Trophy. And now it's coming into this year, going back to DeKalb, and Northern Illinois is going to come to this game with a massive chip on their shoulder. I mean, that team last year should have had it. They should have. And Ball State came back and won it. This year, Northern Illinois is looking for some sweet, sweet revenge. Ball State also coming in with a chip on their shoulder. They've been in games over the last couple of weeks. Can they finally have a game where they can put it all together against a MAC opponent and completely dominate a game of football? These are two teams that just have so much on the line coming into this game. Not really standings-wise, but just like chips on their shoulder-wise. But just they have so much pressure on them to get wins, and it's going to be a fun one to watch, especially with the game going back to DeKalb.
Yeah, I'm with Dane there. You talked about earlier extra motivation. That Northern Illinois game is just one where I think the way they get through that tough, end of the schedule here is by that extra motivation. They want to beat Northern Illinois. They have a chip on their shoulder. I think going into that game, they'll have plenty of energy, and they should be ramped up for it.
Certainly a big one, and we'll talk more about it in a little bit later in the show. But first, we've got a new week of action ahead. We've got some games to pick. Again, we talked about it, races for the MAC West and MAC East titles getting heated up, so we're going to go around the conference and pick these games. We'll start with a MAC East matchup, Ohio at Buffalo. Who do you guys got? We'll start with Evan.
I'm going to go with... This is a tough one for me. I'm going to go with Ohio because I think they're a really good team. But I think that's a pretty even matchup. I think Buffalo, not very good non-conference, but they are 3-2 in the conference. Ohio, they were a little bit better non-conference schedule. I think Ohio's going to take that one, but I think it should be a close game.
I'm going to take Bobcats too. I think Ohio's defense just absolutely rolls over Buffalo. And I just think when I think of Buffalo and from watching Buffalo, they're a very inconsistent team in terms of how they produce. Their offense will have a great game. Their defense won't. Their defense will have a great game, but their offense won't. But Buffalo, I will give Buffalo credit. Buffalo, New York is a hard place to play, especially with, I believe, that there's snow on the ground over there in Buffalo, New York. And Buffalo, New York is a hard place to play. And this Ohio team's going to have a challenge. But I think that with that defense, this Bobcats team is a threat in that division. So give me the Bobcats over the Buffalo Bulls.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a sweep. I got the Bobcats winning a close one, 21-17. Both of these teams at 3-2 conference records in the MAC East, so certainly a big one in Buffalo. And then we got a battle of the Michigans, Central Michigan at Western Michigan. We'll start with Dane.
This is the battle for the victory cannon. And I like rivalry games, especially when they're in-state rivals, Central Michigan and Western Michigan, going toe-to-toe with one another. I'm going to pick an upset here. I'm going to go with Western. I think that Western, strictly based off what I saw off that Ball State game, Western just looks like the better team than Central. Sure, Central's defense looks a bit better than Central's does. But in terms of offensive production, Western certainly has it. I think it's going to be a game of offense for Western. I think Western really does have a day over the Central Michigan defense.
Yeah, I'm going to go Western. Same reasons as Dane. I think this one is a little bit more clear-cut for me than the Ohio-Buffalo matchup.
Yeah, a bit of an upset sweep here. I've got Western as well. I think that they're a good running team. I think that they do have a 3-6 overall record, but I do think just with some of the out-of-conference games that they've played Syracuse, they've played Iowa, that kind of influences that record a little bit. And also Mississippi State too, so I do think that their record maybe kind of gives the wrong impression about how good of a team they are. I got Western Michigan winning. I think it'll be a good one. I got them winning 24-21 in that battle of the Michigans. And then we got another Michigan school, Eastern Michigan, going to Toledo to take on the Rockets. Your picks?
That's a tougher one for me because we saw, all right, Eastern Michigan's not great, right? They've had a tough season. They're 2-3, 4-5 overall. They're all right, but they are fourth in the MAC West. But we've also seen Toledo, they struggle early on in football games. The first half of a lot of their games, they are down. So I don't think Toledo is as good as their 5-0 conference record shows. Ball State almost beat them. I think they're a good team. I don't think they're a great team. I'm going to go with an upset pick here. I'm going to pick Eastern.
All right.
Toledo should be ranked. I'm going to say it right now. Toledo should right now be a ranked opponent. I think that they should probably be at least 25th. They're already receiving votes in the AP poll. They got 3 votes in the AP poll right now. But Toledo, in my eyes, should be ranked. And that's just because of how good this Toledo team really is. And if this game was at the factory in Eastern Michigan, I would probably say that Eastern would keep it close. But because this game is going to be at Toledo in the Glass Bowl, I think it's going to be Toledo gets it done, and Toledo gets it done in a big way over the Eagles.
I look at Toledo, and I see a really good team. I mean, this is the only team in the MAC with an undefeated conference record. Still, they are receiving votes in the AP poll, as you said, Dane. And I think Toledo's good. I don't think they should be ranked yet. I wouldn't go that far. I just think, they're a cool story. It's fun to see Group of 5 teams get some national love. But when you really boil it down, is this one of the best 25 teams in the country? No, it's not. I'm sorry. But with that being said, I think they have definitely been the most consistent team in the MAC right now, 8-1 overall, 5-0 in conference play. I think they keep it rolling and continue to hold strong on the MAC West lead. I think the Rockets win it 28-14.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to give my take on whether or not Toledo should be ranked.
Okay, yeah, because you were looking at me. I knew you had something to say.
Yeah, it's not that, okay, Toledo's good. I'm not going to lie. I'm picking the upset here just because I don't think Toledo's as good as everyone else is saying. Now, if we talk about rankings, all right, the way Dane looks at rankings, yeah, I think Toledo's better than Tulane or Air Force. But I also think the college football rankings are they're just dumb. Okay, the college football rankings, the AP poll, I do not agree with it at all. I do not think that Air Force is a top 25 football team in this country. I think there's teams that have not enough wins to be bowl eligible that are better than some of these teams. I mean, listen, Air Force plays a military academy offense. You go up against any SEC team, I really do think they would beat Air Force.
Any SEC team, you think?
This year, yeah.
Okay.
I think any SEC team beats Air Force.
You think Vanderbilt beats Air Force?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. You know what I do? I think Vanderbilt beats Air Force. I think almost every SEC team could genuinely beat Air Force. I think most Big Ten teams could beat Air Force. It's not that I have anything against Air Force, but you look at the quality of opponents they're playing, it's not there. The SEC teams, teams like Georgia, they're playing a tough opponent every single week. Michigan is playing a tough opponent every single week. Washington even is playing tough opponents. I mean, Air Force, I don't think has the strength of schedule to be a top 25 team in an AP poll.
Yeah, and we will get to our rankings. We'll each do our top 6 and talk about the AP and the CFP. So a little bit of a sneak peek into what could be a very fun discussion between the 3 of us. But first, we still do have a few more MAC games to pick and discuss. Next up, Akron at the Miami Redhawks, who we have talked about. Miami controlling the MAC East, taking on Akron.
Give me Miami. There's no discussion. Akron's coming off a massive comeback win against Kent State, but this Miami Redhawks team is different. They are so much better than what they've been in the past. This might be one of the most talented Miami teams I have seen in the past. So give me the Redhawks big over the Zips.
Yeah, I'm with Dane here. I don't think it's going to be close. I think Miami takes it pretty comfortably. They've looked like a fantastic team this season. they beat Cincinnati earlier in the year. I mean, Cincinnati is not as good as they were, the year where they went to the college football playoff, but it's still Cincinnati. That's a top team. They beat them. They've looked way better than most MAC opponents. The only, little blip is Toledo, but they've looked like a great team. I think Miami wins this one by 20+.
Yeah, to that point, the Red Hawks 7-2 overall, atop the MAC East with a 4-1 conference record. And their only two losses are to Toledo and to Miami of Florida, and that was at the beginning of the year. So a really quality season being put together down in Oxford. I think that the Red Hawks roll, give me them winning 38-10. And then we do have one more MAC game, the Bowling Green Falcons, who our Cardinals just saw yesterday, taking on the Kent State Golden Flashes, who also played yesterday and lost a tough one to the Akron Zips.
Ooh, it's a tough one. Bowling Green coming to this one off of that win against Ball State, a massive win. I mean, they're going to have a lot of morale coming into this game, but Kent State also coming into this game with a chip on their shoulder at home. I don't know, it's going to be a toss-up. You know what? I'm a man of underdog picks. Give me the Kent State Golden Flashes to win this one. I like underdog picks, and I'm going to go with the Flashes on this one.
I like an underdog pick as well. I think it'll be a really close football game, but I think Bowling Green has better quarterback play than Kent State. I think they're the better offense. I think they win this one in a close matchup. I don't know what the score is going to be, but I think it'll be a field goal difference by the end of it.
I look at this one, I want to pick Kent State to win a game, but just after yesterday where they had it against Akron, they were finally putting up some points offensively, which is something they struggled to do all year, and then they let it slip away. I can't do it. And Bowling Green, still a lot to play for with a 5-4 overall record, just a game out of first in the MAC East. Everything is still in front of them. I think Bowling Green wins it. I think they take it 21-13. And that will do it for our Maction segment. Good to have midweek Maction back. We'll have some Saturday games as well as the season progresses. But now we're going to circle back to Ball State and NIU Cardinals traveling up to DeKalb to take on the Huskies this Tuesday. I think that something great to talk about here, because I know we touched on a lot of the aspects of this game earlier. Who's a player that you're watching for on the Cardinals in this game? We'll start with Devin.
I think it's all going to be about receiving for Ball State. I think if they continue to drop passes and just not play very well on the receiving end, I think a lot of things are continuing to happen. With that being said, I do think some of the problems with the Ball State receivers is because of Kyle Kelly maybe not being a great pocket passer. I want to see Kyle Kelly throw the ball more than 20 times. I want to see him complete half of his passes. I think Kyle Kelly is the player to watch for. It's not with what he's doing in the run game. It's not the way this offense has looked when he is running back there. It's how they've looked when he's in the pocket. I think if he can complete half his passes, the Ball State Cardinals win the game. So I'm watching Kyle Kelly.
Me too. I think Kyle Kelly, this is a game where he's going to come in and there's going to be pressure on him to win this game. Strictly because it's a rivalry game. With any rivalry game, there's pressure on the man under center to perform at his best. And that's going to be the question coming in, is can Kyle Kelly put everything together for a game, for such a big game, a battle the defending Bronze Stalk Trophy holders, Ball State really needs. I mean, they've won 3 out of the last 4 meetings between these two. However, they're going back to DeKalb for this one. And if there's going to be a lot of on the line for this game. And Kyle Kelly, I think, has to try his best to put it together. The question is that can he be able to do it? Only time will tell as he goes to NIU take on the Huskies.
I think obviously Kyle Kelly is someone that, ever since he permanently took the starting job, everyone's had their eye on him, and I think it's, a great point that you guys both make. But I'm looking for Tanner Koziel, because I get it. Kyle Kelly's a run-first quarterback. You schedule, the play calling, and you have the game plan revolve around him and his play style. I get that. But Tanner Koziel not having a catch yesterday, that's unacceptable. You have to get the ball in the hands of your playmakers. Somehow it doesn't have to be this deep 20-yard route. Just dump it off to him in the flat, see what he can do with it. He's too good to not have any catches, especially in a game where you are putting up some points and some solid drives offensively. I'm looking for Tanner Koziel to get back involved into the offense, for them to scheme him into the game a little bit more, because again, I know that the Cardinals, they like to spread the ball around, they like to run the ball, but when you have one of the best tight ends in the conference out there and you're not throwing him the ball, I don't care who's under center, I don't care what the score is, that's a problem. I'm looking for number 88 on Tuesday to have a big day. And I think that, our picks really kind of go hand in hand, because if Kyle Kelly can get him the ball, Tanner Koziel, we know what he's capable of doing. He's stepped up especially with Brady Hunt, his partner in crime there in the Ball State tight end room, being out with an injury all year. So certainly a lot of fun players to watch for Ball State, especially with their new look offense. And we'll shift over to our keys to the game segment. I'll give you guys a prompt. The Cardinals will win on Tuesday if, Evan.
The Cardinals will win on Tuesday. Kind of what I just said, if Kyle Kelly can complete passes to his receivers, but more importantly, sit in the pocket. I think he's been really impatient back there. I think he looks a little too quickly to run, which is fine. Obviously, he's a great run threat, but I think he needs to sit back there for at least a second longer, look for his receivers downfield. So I think the Ball State Cardinals win. Also, it goes with what you said as well. If they can get their playmakers the football, even if that's just throwing a little screen or something, into the flat to your number one tight end, who's been a really good tight end for this team. Tanner Koziel is a solid player. I think the Ball State Cardinals win this football game if Kyle Kelly completes half or over half of his passes.
I think they win it if the defense keeps up the momentum. I mean, they had a great game against Bowling Green. They got to bring in that same energy to this game against NIU. I mean, Rocky Lombardi under center, he's looked probably like the most consistent quarterback for Northern Illinois, and not only in Northern Illinois, but in the MAC as well. He's looked like the most consistent one, and he's a threat back there under center for the Huskies. They got to keep up the consistency. This Ball State defense needs to bring it, and they can't allow big plays like they did against Bowling Green. They got to make Rocky make mistakes. They got to get some pressure on him. If they do that, then this Ball State offense, all they got to do is get something rolling, get some consistency, maybe in the run game, maybe in the passing game. All they got to do is just shut Rocky Lombardi down, and they will win this one by a large margin.
Large margin, okay. So two good points there. For me, it's Ball State will win on Tuesday if they can play from ahead, because that's how they are built to play. They have to get to a good start early. That's what they did against Central Michigan. That's why they were able to control that game pretty much from start to finish. In games like the Toledo game, in games like the Bowling Green game, where they were playing from behind, it just kind of takes the offense out of their comfort zone. This is a team that likes to run the ball, that likes to have long, 10, 12 play drives that take 7 minutes. But when you're down in the fourth quarter, that element kind of gets taken away, and we saw that in the late stages yesterday against Bowling Green. So I think if the Cardinals can set the tone of the game, control the pace of the game, I think they'll be in really good shape. And one more thing about this game that I'll have each of you guys do, and then we'll get into our ranking segment, which I know is going to be a fun time. Any bold predictions for the game, and feel free to throw in a score prediction if you'd like.
Yeah, I got a bold prediction. I think Ball State wins by 14. I think it'll be, let's say 28-14.
All right.
I'm going to go a little bit bolder than that. Kyle Kelly has 4 total touchdowns. 2 passing, 2 rushing. Marquez Cooper is over 100 yards rushing. And Ball State wins this game by 20 points.
Wow, that's...
I'll tell you what, that is going to be the most effective that this offense...
Oh, wait, I'm not
has
done.
season.
I'm not done. And the Ball State defense has at least 4.5 sacks.
Okay, so might have the best performance in program history on Tuesday. If
There's a lot on the line.
correct.
There's a lot on the line.
So, with Dane's predictions, we might win by 50.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, all that.
I said probably the final probably be 35-14.
Wow, so we had 28-14, 35-14. Feeling optimistic here on a Thursday afternoon. My prediction, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. I think Tanner Koziel gets more involved in the offense. I'm going to say he has at least 6 catches and goes for a touchdown. I do think the Cardinals win, but I'm going to say 27-24. I think it'd be great if they could blow them out of the water like you're saying, Dane, but I think that NIU, they got a lot to play for still. They're coming in at 4-5 overall. Need to win 2 of their last 3 to be bowl eligible, but hey, I don't think anyone would complain if your prediction came true. So that'll do it for our Ball State at NIU preview. They will do battle this coming Tuesday, and now you've been waiting for it. We're each going to give our top 6 teams in college football, talk about the AP poll, the CFP rankings, what we think about them both, and I think who wants to start us off here?
Definitely you, Ryan.
You want me to start?
Because you had last time I was on this show, you had Florida State above Michigan. You had Florida State pretty high, and I was pretty upset about that. Where do you have Florida State now?
Well, we'll get there. I'll go from 6 to 1, I guess. So at number 6, I have Oregon. I do think that they are the best one-loss team. I think that the Pac-12 being stronger than maybe it's ever been really helps their resume. Their one loss was a really quality loss at a tough environment to a good Washington team, who I'll talk about in a second. And this is where my rankings really get unconventional because I have Michigan at number 5. I think that this could very well be the best team in the country, but they just don't have the strength of schedule, in my opinion, to justify a top ranking. And I am not saying that they cannot be good. I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see them win the whole thing. But when you look at what teams have put on the field to this point, they do not have the resume that any of these next 4 teams that I'm going to name have, because they don't have a ranked win. And it's just the way their schedule is shaped out. They haven't played Penn State yet. They haven't played Ohio State yet. And again, everything will fall into place. Michigan's going to play Ohio State. Georgia's going to play better teams. The Pac-12 championship will sort itself out. Everything's going to fall into place. But as of right now, I just don't see the strength of schedule that justifies me ranking Michigan much higher than this. And at number 4, I've got the defending champs in Georgia. It's a similar reason. I just think that with the shaky strength of schedule aside, I think that they've started to turn it on in recent weeks, but they started off the season with some fairly shaky performances. They trailed against South Carolina at home, 14-3 at half, had a really close game against an Auburn team that's not exactly a powerhouse in the SEC, but they do have a dominant win over a Kentucky team that was ranked at the time. That's what puts them over Michigan for me. And at number 3, I've got Washington. They've looked a little shaky in recent weeks, but that win against Oregon, the points that they put up in a lot of their games, it's really something that values a lot to me, and also clearly to the CFP committee, because they had them in the top 5 despite. Well, I guess they are 2 an undefeated team, and they had them in the top 5 despite having that close win against Oregon. And they had Oregon and Washington right next to each other, which I thought was interesting. Washington at 3 for me, and at number 2, Dane, I have Florida State. I think you still have to look at that dominant win against LSU. You look at other quality wins that they have, like the win at Duke. And at number 1, I agree with the CFP committee. I think Ohio State has the best resume in the country. They have not been as dominant as a team like Michigan or a team even like Georgia at some points. But when you really boil it down, what do you want to reward? Do you want to reward beating lower tier programs at home by 50, or do you want to go reward going on the road to Notre Dame, winning in a tough environment, beating a really good Penn State team and having a great defensive showing doing it? I think the CFP committee, I don't think they have it exactly right, but I think they are more right than the AP poll, and that's what I usually think. So a bit unconventional. Sure, we'll have some fun debate here in a moment, but I've got Ohio State, Florida State, Washington, Georgia, Michigan, and Oregon from 1 to 6 in my top 6. But obviously, again, everything will sort itself out. We got, everyone's raising their hand, pointing at each other. So who wants to go next?
Well, listen, Ryan, me and you were on the same page. I was really liking what you were saying. And then we had Florida State at number 2, and I thought, well, we've just thrown it out the window. Florida State is not the second best team in the country. They're not the top 4. They're not a top 4 team in the country, okay? Florida State had a really good win against LSU. That's it. Besides that, they beat teams they should absolutely beat. Boston College, they let them score 29 points. They beat Boston College by 2 points. Boston College. Southern Miss, obviously they should beat them. Clemson, it was a close game against Clemson. They beat Virginia Tech by a lot. Syracuse by a lot. They should win those games. Duke, good game there. They won there by a lot. These are all teams that are not that good. Wake Forest, Duke, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and Boston College. And Boston College was a close matchup. Other than the LSU win this season, which was that was their first game of the season, they have not played a quality opponent. So I do not think that Florida State at the second position is there at all. I'll go, that's all I'm saying on that. So I'll start with my number 6. I have Oregon at number 6. I think they're the best one-loss team as well. And I think I have Washington rated very highly. So I think that was a fairly understandable loss. At number 5 is where I put Florida State. If you're going to put them, I'd like to not put them in the top 6, but that's delusional. They're still a top team. I have Florida State at number 5. Number 4 is where I put Ohio State. I'm not a believer in Ohio State. I don't think they're that good, and I just don't see much there. Number 3 is where I put Georgia. I think Georgia's a top team, but I do agree with you that they haven't played a top SEC team yet. I'm really excited to see Georgia play Missouri.
Yeah.
Because I think that is going to be a really good game, and I think Missouri is going to give them their first test, really, all season, because I think Missouri is a really good football team. So that's exciting. And number 2 is where I put Washington. I think Washington is easily a college football playoff team. I think they have this year's Heisman winner. I think Michael Penix Jr. looks really, really good. I think that offense is incredibly high-powered. They don't not score. I think they played a bad game against Arizona State. But other than that, the way they've scored the football this season has looked really, really good. And then at number 1, I have Michigan. I think they're the best team in the country. I think they're the best team in the Big Ten. You can talk, strength of schedule all you want. They've destroyed teams in the Big Ten. They put up 52-7 against Indiana. They've shut out Michigan State, their rivals, 49-0. Beat Minnesota 52-10. Michigan, Nebraska 45-7. They kill teams. So I think when we see them play Penn State and Ohio State, that'll tell us what they're really made of. But right now, the way that they've taken care of some of their weaker opponents compared to the way Ohio State has taken care of some of the weaker opponents. Ohio State's had a lot closer games against some of the same teams. I think Michigan's the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, I mean, Evan, you couldn't have said it better about Florida State because I have Florida State at 6. That's the only difference. I think Oregon is so much better than Florida State. If Oregon played Florida State right now, Oregon, despite Jordan Travis being a elite quarterback in college football right now, I think Oregon would blow them out of the water. And that's why I have Oregon at 5. And sure, we can talk. I have really 2 lists that I make strictly based off of talent and resume, and I really combine the 2. And at number 4, I have Georgia, and I think that it was a battle between Georgia and Washington for 4 and 3, and I think that Georgia is just. I think Washington is so much better than Georgia. I just think that if you have the probably Heisman winner Michael Penix Jr. on your team, who's playing lights out this season for the Huskies, I think that Washington is so much better, and that's why I have the Huskies at 3 over Georgia. And we'll see what Georgia does coming up. I mean, like Evan said, they have Missouri coming up. They have a couple of interesting games. They got Ole Miss after that week, and it's going to be interesting to see what Georgia does. But Washington is clearly the number 3 team in the country. Number 2, I have Michigan. Like you said, Evan, this team's been blowing out teams all over the place. And yeah, you could argue that their schedule, that these teams that they've played are pretty bad. And I could say the same thing. They're not great opponents. The Big Ten teams that they played, they're not good. They're probably the bottom of the Big Ten. But I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Michigan going forward with all the controversy and the sign stealing and all that stuff going forward. It's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward. I mean, there have been rumors that they're going to get banned from the Big Ten championship. There have been rumors saying that the coaches want that to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Michigan going forward. But for now, Michigan is the number 2 team in the country for sure. Strictly based off of talent. I mean, this team is probably the most talented team in the country. You're going to make that argument. This offense led by J.J. McCarthy is just lights out. I mean, J.J. he's probably a dark horse Heisman contender going forward.
I don't know if you'd say dark horse at this point.
However, if you look at we'll see how he plays in the last 3 weeks. If he plays like he's played in the last 3 weeks, if he plays lights out against Penn State and Ohio State, you could make an argument that he could win Heisman over Michael Penix Jr. However, not really the case considering how Michael Penix has been playing this entire season. However, J.J. McCarthy is going to lead this Michigan team to the number 2 spot against the rival, the number 1 team in the country. I mean, Ryan, you couldn't have said it better. Ohio State has that resume as the number 1 team in the country. That defense is elite. The defense is extremely good so far, but I mean they've proven to be a formidable foe in tough opponents. I mean they had that Notre Dame win to begin the year. They had the dominant defensive showing against Penn State. The offense struggled. Kyle McCord struggled a little bit against Wisconsin last week. However, Ohio State has a couple of tough opponents coming up. They go to Rutgers on the road. Rutgers is a different team this year. They're a lot better than what they've been in the past. They go to Michigan this year at the end of the year, and playing in the Big House is definitely an issue. But, I mean, for these top 2 teams, we'll see what's going forward. There's a lot of speculation as to what's going to happen between these 2 teams. But all I got to say is that the game this year is going to be the game this year. Ohio State's probably going to be number 1. We'll see what Michigan does going forward, despite with the NCAA being involved and all that controversy going on. But that game is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I'm so excited to wait until Thanksgiving weekend when that happens. It's going to be a lot of fun. But Ohio State at 1, Michigan at 2, Washington 3, Georgia 4, Oregon 5, and then Florida State at 6.
I just want to put this out there right now. If Washington wins their next 3 games, they're the number 1 team in the country, in my opinion. They're going to have to play USC on the road. Then they play Utah, both ranked teams, and then they play Oregon State. And then they close out their season with a team that's not that, which has struggled in the conference, but looked good early on, Washington State, and obviously that's a rivalry game. If they win their last 4 games, I think they're the number 1 team in the country.
they definitely are going to have a case, and I think it's interesting because you look at it right now. The CFP committee, there's 5 undefeated teams. They have them at that 5th spot on the outside looking in, so they're going to need to boost their resume a little bit, and they'll have an opportunity to do that.
Now, Ryan, this is a question I have for you and Dave. Do they need to win all 3 of those games, or can they just win 2 of them and get in?
I think they could probably just win 2 of them. I mean, those ranked opponents, especially against those ranked opponents, there have been teams before that have been one-loss teams that have made a valuable case in their losses. I mean, look at Ohio State last year. I mean, they lost big to Michigan last year, and they got in as a 4 seed. This Washington team could do the same thing. I mean, let's just say they hypothetically beat the 3 and then lose to Washington State. I mean, depends how bad they lose to Washington State, but you can make an argument that they are the number 3, number 4 team in the country. They
beat
can make
all 3 of those ranked teams.
Exactly.
They have a great argument.
They have a great argument to be the number 3, number 4 team in the country. But if you look at resume, Ohio State has the best resume out of all of them. Washington right now, correct. Washington, if they beat them, they could make a legitimate case for the number 1 team in the country. The team I'm eyeing on right now is Michigan. With all that controversy going on, with all that sign stealing stuff going on, you don't know what's going to happen to them. They could be banned. There's a possibility, and the Big Ten coaches have been harping on this. There's a report that came out a couple days ago that said that the Big Ten coaches are basically complaining to the committee of the Big Ten committee that Michigan should be banned from the Big Ten championship. They should not be allowed to be in a bowl game. They shouldn't be allowed to be in this college football playoff if they make it. And if that's the case, if the NCAA comes back and says, hey, Michigan is out of the playoff, then who gets in? Who is going to be above Michigan? If they are a top 2 team, if they are a top 4 team in the country, who gets in over Michigan if they're banned from the college football playoff?
I have 2 things to say. I think the team that gets in right now, when you look at them, is Oregon. I think Oregon looks really good. Or you could say Florida State, depending on if they're there or not. Because I think if Washington wins all 3 of those games in that hypothetical situation, they jump above.
It might be Florida State strictly because Oregon is probably going to Oregon is probably going to lose to Washington again in the Pac-12 championship.
Well,
and then
now
Florida State will have that ACC championship.
Well, that's
the hypothetical
Yeah.
though, because let's say Washington wins out and they win 3 tough games in a row, beat Washington State, and then they lose to Oregon. I think both of those teams have a claim that they should be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you look at Florida State's end of the year. I'd say their toughest game is against Florida, that last one, because besides that, they have to beat Miami, Pitt, and North Alabama. Those should not be the toughest matchups. So Florida State should win out until they get to the conference championship. So I hear what you're saying. That brings a lot of hypotheticals into question. But Michigan, one, I want to say this. They need to get this resolved within the next 2 weeks. Because
they have to.
That'll clear a lot of things up. But the last thing we need is for this to go down to the wire and a team finds out last second or some random thing happens. They need to get that solved right now because the sooner they do that, the lot more clear this picture will be, because then we won't be talking about who's going to get the extra 2 spots. It'll just be the one, because I don't think Georgia and Ohio State really – they're going to have to collapse at the end of the year not to get in the college football playoff, in my opinion, because they've looked really good. They both haven't lost, and I don't see Ohio State losing until they would obviously have to play Michigan.
I don't either, and I think that's where the controversy is going to lie is when is that decision going to come out? I mean, everyone's saying a bunch of things that, Jim Harbaugh is going to get suspended, and he's going to be done for the year. We already know about Connor Stallings. He's suspended already without pay. And there's just so much hypothetical stuff coming from this controversy in every single person. It's not just the Big Ten. There are teams like Central Michigan thought they saw him. They thought they saw Connor Stallings on the sideline. And it's not just a Big Ten issue. It is a world-renowned college football landscape issue that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. I get they're going through an investigation. They want to make sure they have all their facts sorted out. They want to make sure that they get this decision right. However, if you delay Michigan until the last week of the season when they go to play their biggest rival and probably to get into the CFP, it's going to look so bad when they beat Ohio State. If they beat Ohio State and it comes out and they are not allowed in after they completed an entire season. It's just going to be such a bad look for not only the college football committee but the NCAA as a whole if they come back with a decision after Michigan has basically proved themselves to be in the college football playoff and they can't be in it. And they're also going to be probably banned from the Big Ten championship, so it makes it even worse. So I agree with Evan. The sooner they come back with a decision about this issue, probably the better it's going to be. And I really hope that it doesn't have to come down to the last week of the season.
Yeah, for sure, because you just don't want that to be, hanging over everyone's heads and everyone's wondering, what's it going to be? What are the scenarios? I mean, there's enough chaos as it is when it comes to deciding who's going to be the Final Four in the college football playoff. I mean, we've talked about it, like if Washington loses a regular season game, then beats Oregon, you have 2 quality one-loss teams there. Obviously, Florida State, if they run the table, win the ACC, you got to think that they have a really good shot. Obviously, Georgia, Michigan controlling their own destinies. But then, last year we saw Ohio State lose and move on, basically, with them losing badly to Michigan. But then USC slipped up in the Pac-12 championship, allowing Ohio State to hold on to that 4 seed. And even this year, Ohio State's already got 2 quality wins on their resume. If they lose a close one to Michigan, even though they wouldn't appear in a conference championship game, I still think they'd have a very strong case to get in, given the resume that they've already built.
Yeah, and it's just going to come down to if Michigan ends up going to the Big Ten championship. Let's say they beat Ohio State. If there's going to be, are they going to be in the Big Ten championship game? So this decision coming from the NCAA on what they're going to do with Michigan is going to be crucial in terms of how the CFP looks going forward.
I think, and as you guys mentioned, I think what's going to be interesting is if Michigan does go ahead and get banned from the Big Ten championship and then the college football playoffs, they can't play in a bowl game, that's going to break the opportunity to get in the college football playoff wide open. That's going to give 2 opportunities, in my opinion now, for a team to break in there. So I think by November 18th, that's the day I'm watching, that's the second to last game for most of these teams, the regular season game. That's the one I'm looking at. That's the day where I think this picture will be very clear. And I think we'll know exactly what the top 6 teams in the country need to do to get in the playoffs. And for some of them, it'll be controlling their own destiny. They just need to win out. For others of them, it's going to be, it's okay if we drop a game because our strength of schedule was so good. We're undefeated until this. Like Washington, if they win the next 4 games, they can lose to Oregon, in my opinion, and get in fine. Oregon needs to win out to get in the college football playoff. They cannot have a second loss, I don't think, to have an argument to get in.
I agree.
I can see that. I mean, the game that's going to decide it is that Ohio State-Michigan game, and the stakes have never been higher.
Yeah.
This is probably the most crazy games that we are going to witness because Michigan's coming off of 2 back-to-back wins over Ohio State, both home and away. There's this whole cheating scandal. There's this whole scandal. And the game goes back to the big house with Ohio State looking to claim a win over their rival in probably in the biggest rivalry in sports. Mm-hmm. It doesn't get any better than that. And this rivalry game, especially when they're a number 1 seed and a number 2 seed in the college football playoff, the number 1 and number 2 teams going up against each other, this game is going to be nuts. This game is going to be absolutely crazy. And especially if Michigan gets banned, it's gonna just fuel the fire, and I just can't wait. I can't wait to see this game. I really just this game the game this year is going to be the game to watch this year.
Yeah, and Evan, real quick, you got something?
Yeah, I'm with Dan. That is going to be, I think, the most exciting college football. It's like a primetime boxing match. That is what that's going to be. I think everyone's going to have it on. It's going to be the most exciting college football game of the year. That's prime time. That doesn't get any better.
They should make this a night game. I 100% agree.
I agree with Dan. That should absolutely be a night game. It should be 7, 8 o'clock at night. It's when the game should start. Everyone should be watching it. It's going to be a fantastic football game. But
this game is going to be like the Super Bowl.
But as we talked about, there are stipulations. Michigan needs to be allowed to play. It's for that to happen, right? Like for that game to matter, Michigan needs to be able to go to a bowl game, and they need to not get in trouble from the NCAA. So now the question is, I don't think we've really talked about this. What do you guys think? Should Michigan be punished?
I mean, obviously there's been things going around. I really don't want to speculate too much just because I feel like there's just so much we don't know. I feel like everywhere you look there's a different opinion or a different take. I mean, obviously, you never condone cheating. That's not something you want in our game. It's not good for the sport. But there's just so many questions left about the situation. Who did what? Who knew what? Where? I mean, that decision is much bigger than me. So obviously it's an unfortunate situation. if Michigan did do these things, and if they did do these things, it's especially unfortunate for these players who maybe had no part in it, or for anyone else involved with their program that didn't have any part in it, but yet may have to bear the consequences if some type of indictment does come down from the NCAA. So, I mean, from my standpoint, I'm not going to speculate or make any accusations one way or another. I'll follow the storyline. I'll keep an open mind, and whatever the Big Ten or the committee or the NCAA, whoever makes a decision, I mean, whatever they decide, that's what's going to end up being the final say.
Yeah, I'm with you, Ryan. It's really unclear who did what, and I don't think we can really make. We don't have enough of information to make an informed opinion on it. Mm-hmm. But I do think what's really unfortunate is the players 99%. Most likely had no idea that was going on.
Yeah,
they're the ones who get hurt by this, and they've played incredible this season. Those players are some of the best in the country. J.J. McCarthy's a fantastic quarterback. You really just feel bad if they do get in trouble because it's not their fault, and they're a great football team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because this is coming from an Ohio State fan. I'm a lifelong Ohio State fan, and I don't want this to happen to the player. It's unfair. Yes. However, there is a part that you have to maintain integrity of the game. And this is going to make it even worse because Jim Harbaugh already got suspended. I think Jim Harbaugh is an amazing coach. He's an NFL ready head coach. He's a proven head coach, probably going to the NFL Hall of Fame if he goes back to the NFL and has a NFL. I think he's probably going to the Hall of Fame. And if you look at Jim Harbaugh, he's already been suspended once this year. He was suspended for the first 4 games this year because of recruiting violations. And now you add on this entire scandal, it's going to get worse. The suspension, if Jim Harbaugh is suspended, it's going to be worse. He probably will be done, and I believe the suspension will probably go into next year. It's not just going to be a this year thing. You could say that it's going to be this year strictly because of the bowl game. They're getting banned from the bowl game. They're going to probably get banned from the CFP. However, if Jim Harbaugh, this is the second time this year being suspended, I believe that they're not going to be as lenient this time. They're going to punish Jim Harbaugh because there's speculation that he knew about this, and he may not, but all the signs are pointing to the head coach, and there's going to be a lot of questions going forward for this Michigan football
I think
team.
Jim Harbaugh could really easily be used as a scapegoat here for the NCAA, and I think it's possible they just punish him and not Michigan, which. Whether that's fair or not, I think Jim Harbaugh is a really good coach, and I don't think in the long run it's going to matter. But if it comes down to they either punish Michigan or they punish Jim Harbaugh, I think probably Jim Harbaugh himself would rather him just get punished and Michigan continue to allow to play because the rest of the team doesn't deserve to have to not play the rest of the year. I mean, they've been a great team. And even if Jim Harbaugh didn't do anything wrong, the head coach is always going to, he's the captain of the ship.
Yep.
If something bad happens on your boat, that it goes back to you, right?
This is the worst case scenario. And let's just say hypothetically Jim Harbaugh gets fired. He will have a phone call from an NFL team within 12 hours.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's going to make a lot of money.
So let's just say this. There's literally no problem that Jim Harbaugh will have a job within the next 12 hours. I promise you. And that's the worst case scenario for Michigan fans is that if he gets fired, which I doubt will happen because he's that good of a coach, if, let's just say, hypothetically, does get fired, he will have a phone call from an NFL team within 12 hours.
Jim Harbaugh is one of the best coaches, in my opinion, to never have won a national championship or a Super Bowl. He probably could have and should have had both.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and it's an interesting storyline, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and we'll see maybe by the time that this show's being recorded next week, there's new information. But until then, we'll leave that be a great discussion, but it is time to move in to our pick segment. We're going to pick some of the key games around college football, some that we've already talked about a little bit, and I think all of these games, or definitely at least 3 of them, will have really strong impacts on the CFP race. We'll start off with a big SEC matchup, Missouri going to take on number 2 Georgia. Evan, we'll start with you.
This is an important football game for Georgia, and I think for Missouri, they want to continue to climb up the rankings. If Georgia wins this game, then I think there's really no argument that they're not a top 4 team. But also, if they lose this game, they should plummet down the rankings because I think there's been a lot of questions about Georgia this year, and I think a lot of them have been fair. But if they can win this game against a top SEC opponent, a ranked team, then I think they really answer a lot of those questions we've had. My pick for this one, I'm going to go Georgia, but I think it'll be close. I think they win by 7.
This game's going to be interesting. And I said this on my show, on My 2 Cents, that if this game was in Columbia, that Missouri would probably come out with an upset. But because this game is at Georgia in Athens, I think Georgia will win this game. But I just want to tell you the implications that Missouri honestly could pull away with the SEC East if they win this game and win out. Because let's just say hypothetically the both teams end with only one loss in conference play. Missouri is going to have that edge over Georgia strictly because of this win. Mm-hmm. And they will go to the SEC championship game. And Georgia might be out at that point because Missouri will probably take their spot in the CFP as probably the SEC champions maybe. However, I do think Georgia will get it done. I think it's going to be closer than what people think it's going to be. And I don't think Georgia blows them out of the water because Brock Bowers is probably going to be out this game. And he's been the X factor for this Georgia offense. And they've proven to win without him, but can they win without him against a formidable opponent in Missouri? And I think they do.
I just want to say one more thing. Here's the key. Missouri's offense has been fantastic all season. That's not their issue. They need to hold Georgia underneath 28 points, or I don't think they win this one because they've really struggled defensively this year. They've given up a lot of points. That game against LSU, they had 39 points. It was 49-39. Missouri lost to LSU. Their offense still played well. They scored 39 points. Their offense is not the problem. They need to be good defensively. That LSU loss is the one blemish on their record. I think this will tell us a lot more about Georgia than it does about Missouri. I think we know who Missouri is as a football team. Georgia, that's where a lot of our questions tend to be.
Yeah, you guys both make great points. And, this is one where Georgia, the question that people have about them is the resume. It's the strength of schedule. It's can you look good against quality opponents? This is an opportunity for them to do just that. And also on the Missouri side, Dane, you kind of alluded to it. If they pull this off, then we got to start taking them seriously as a CFP contender. So this is definitely a fun one with a lot of interesting storylines on both sides, but I think the Bulldogs take it at home. I think they win by 10, 31-21. And then shifting over to the SEC West, another big one, LSU at Alabama. We'll start with Dane.
Ooh, it's a good one. I think there are three teams right now that are still in the race for the SEC West. It's Alabama, Ole Miss, and LSU. Those are the three. And LSU, if they can pull out a win against Alabama will still be in the lead, but I think that LSU might jump up at the top spot strictly because of that win over Alabama. And we are not used to Alabama being a really sluggish team. We expect Alabama to blow LSU out of the water. But LSU has been proven to be in some games. You saw it against Missouri. They were in that game for most of it. Alabama, this is an Alabama team that has been kind of known to be a little bit more grindy than what we're used to seeing. They're not known to blow opponents out, but they're facing a different LSU team. There is speculation that LSU is going to be pretty bad this year. They're a two-loss team, but look at the teams that they've played over the last couple of weeks. They had Missouri against that win against Missouri. They had basically LSU is a formidable foe to Alabama. And they're going to play this game in Tuscaloosa, yes, but LSU has always been Alabama's kryptonite. And I think that LSU pulls off an upset win against Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
All right.
Yeah, I like what Dane's saying. I agree with it, but for some reason, I do not believe... This is tough. This is a tough one. It's going to be a close game. I think really pick your poison here. There's reasons both of these teams could win, and there's reason both of them could lose. It is a close race right now. Alabama is at home. I'm going to pick Alabama just for that reason. I think if they had to go to Death Valley and take on the Tigers, it's a different story. If they had to go, play LSU at home. But Alabama at home is really good. I don't think they lose this game, and I think LSU is a little bit overrated at that 13 spot.
I could agree with that, yeah.
I think that this one, it's another one where it's those big implications. It's LSU. They have 2 losses already, so they're probably almost certainly out of it. But Alabama, this would be a great win to add to their resume. And Dane, you said it well. This isn't maybe the Alabama team that we've seen in years past, but they're just finding a way to grind out games, relying on their defense a lot more than they have in the past. But also I think quarterback Jalen Milroe is starting to progress each and every week. He had a bit of a shaky start to the season. Didn't have a great game in that Texas game, but since then he's really, I think, gotten more confident as a passer, helped that Alabama offense put up some more points, get more in rhythm, and I think that continues against an LSU defense that's been a lot more shaky than Alabama's. So I think the Tide take it at home 38-31, but this should be a fun SEC game. And now heading over to the West Coast, Washington at USC. Evan, I know you were hyping up the Washington Huskies a little bit ago, so we'll start with you.
And I'm going to continue to do so. I think Washington is the best football team in the country. I ranked Michigan number 1, but I think, other than Michigan, I think Washington is the best football team in the country. I love their offense. Watching them is exciting. I think Michael Penix is the Heisman winner. J.J. McCarthy's in there. I think Michael Penix is the best quarterback right now in college football. I think Washington takes this one. I think USC has struggled with consistency this year. I think they lose. I think they fall out of the college football rankings, and I think Washington wins by 2 to 3 touchdowns.
All right.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, this USC defense has struggled. They've struggled ever since Lincoln Riley took over. They've been pretty much the Achilles heel of Lincoln Riley's reign so far at USC. And this is Heisman contender versus Heisman contender. I mean, it's Caleb Williams versus Michael Penix Jr. But Caleb Williams, there's only one flaw that this matchup has. Caleb Williams can't win big games. He can't. He's been proven not to. I saw something the other day. He was like 1-4 in games that were big time games. He can't win big games. He's looked terrible in big games. And coming into this game, I guess USC is at home. Washington is a different breed, though. They're a different team than what we've seen. Michael Penix Jr. is the Heisman favorite right now, and I think Penix throws all over this USC defense, and I think Washington probably wins this game by 3 touchdowns. It will not be close.
Okay, so both of you guys really feeling the Huskies. This is an interesting one because it's one of those games where you feel like the fact that it's on the road, the fact that USC, they're clearly not happy with where they are. It's tempting to pick USC, but their defense has just been so lackluster. Cal gave them all they could handle last week. Look, both of these teams put up points, but Washington at least has somewhat of a defense. USC, it's like Swiss cheese back there sometimes. I'm sorry. I think Washington is able to outlast USC, but I think it's going to be closer than you guys think. I've got Washington winning 42-35.
And you know what? I'm going to go back on a little bit what I said. I still think Washington wins. I agree after looking at some things with what Ryan's saying. On the road, Washington tends to have closer games. They did beat Oregon at Oregon, which was a great win. No, sorry, they didn't beat Oregon on Oregon, but they did have to go to Stanford, and they let Stanford put up 33 points.
Yeah.
Stanford should not be putting up 33 points against Washington. They've looked a little shaky at times, but I will say Michael Penix's worst game this season, he threw for 275 yards. That was his worst game. Most of the games he's thrown well over 300. I think Michael Penix is enough to get the job done on the road, but I do think it'll be closer. I'm going to say 35-28.
Okay, so going to a one-score game. And lastly, this one probably not going to have any CFP implications. 2 teams that have been a little disappointing. Notre Dame at Clemson. Notre Dame probably still looking at a New Year's Six bowl if they could win out. Clemson, they're just trying to be bowl eligible and make sure they win 6 games at this point. So who do you guys got in this one?
Dabo Swinney's trying to stay off the hot seat right now, especially with how his team has looked so far this year. They're 4-4, not usually what you see out of a Clemson football team. And this Notre Dame team, they've had a lot of heartbreaking losses, and they've had a lot of gritty wins. So this Notre Dame team is a very decent team. Sam Hartman going back to play an ACC foe when he was at Wake Forest. He's going back to play an ACC foe in Clemson. And I can't think of nothing better to end Sam Hartman's career, his college football career, than to beat the former ACC powerhouse in Clemson. I can't think of a better way for him to go out with the Irish. And I think Notre Dame goes up big in Death Valley at Clemson. Yeah, Death Valley is a hard place to play, but this Clemson team has been known to struggle this year. They're a struggling team this year. They're a struggling program as a whole because they're trying to figure out, is Dabo Swinney on the hot seat? Is he not? Are we going to keep him around for years to come? Are we not? It's just a lot of questions around Dabo Swinney coming up. That program right now is feeling a little bit shaky, so I think that Notre Dame gets it done, and Sam Hartman has a career day against his former ACC rival in Clemson.
I agree with Dane. I think Notre Dame is a little bit better than... Here's the thing. Notre Dame should have beat Ohio State. We look at Ohio State completely differently if they lose that game. They got beat pretty thoroughly by Louisville. I still think this team should be 8-1, not 7-2, and should be in the top 10. I think they're a top 10 team. I think they take care of Clemson pretty comfortably. And I think they also win out because they only have to play Wake Forest and Stanford. They should be in a good bowl game. They should be in a New Year's Six bowl game. So I think they win. It's important that they win because if they lose another game, then obviously our opinion of them drops massively. But I still think this is a top team. The Louisville game was an unfortunate outlier, but the Ohio State game where they were close and probably should have won, I think more shows you what Notre Dame can do. I think Notre Dame takes care of business, and I think they win by 2 or 3 scores.
This one, I think that it's Notre Dame. I think you guys have really hit the nail on the head. Still a good team, just out of CFP contention, probably based on the fact that, one, they have 2 losses, but then they also don't play in a conference, so they don't get the opportunity to play another quality opponent come December. But I look at Clemson, and man, like, they're 4-4. If they lose this game, I mean, it's not even certain they make a bowl game. So just fascinating how quickly things can change in the landscape of college football just over a few years, as Clemson was not too long ago a perennial national title contender. I look at Notre Dame. The Louisville loss is disappointing, as you said, Evan, but other than that, some strong wins, a dominant win against USC, a gritty win down in Duke. Louisville's a disappointment, but Ohio State, they were literally a second away from winning that one. So this is a team that I know they constantly get criticized of being overrated year in and year out. They got a lot of haters. I'm not one of them. Are you saying you're a hater?
Normally I am, but this team is not.
Okay,
this team is not overrated.
And I respect that. You normally hate them, but you're able to give them their props. I respect that, because I don't think sports fans do that enough. So I think this is a strong Notre Dame team. I think that Clemson is not at their level, and I think even though Clemson has them at home, it's not enough. I got Notre Dame winning 31-21. And guys, I mean, that'll do it. We talked about a lot of college football, started with our Ball State Cardinals, went around the MAC, then did our rankings, which was a fun segment, and then picked all these games. So to both of you, thanks for being here, and it was great to have you guys.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Had a lot of fun.
Of course. So that was this week's episode of Behind the Lines on SportsLink Digital Radio, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. Have a great weekend.
This has been a production of SportsLink Digital Radio.